12 warlords were waiting behind those blast doors, and every one of them wanted someone to answer for what had happened in the training arena 3 days ago. Instructor Velcanos felt his thoracic sacs tighten as the elevator chimed, and the doors split apart. He had survived 3 centuries in Calaxian military service. Nothing in those centuries had prepared him for the report sitting, unread and radioactive, on 12 separate desks above him. He hadn't wanted to write it. He'd had no choice. Something had happened in combat simulation Theta 9 that broke every assumption the galaxy's militaries had ever made about the smallest, softest species in known space, and he was the only witness with clearance to explain it. 3 days earlier, none of this had seemed possible. The Nexus Prime training campus ran on a particular kind of arrogance, the kind that came from housing the galaxy's most feared bloodlines under one roof. Grimlock, a Voran with forearms like reactor coils, liked to remind everyone that his people had taken 47 systems by force and never bothered asking permission. Scythia, a Nethri whose skin bent light around itself, drifted through the halls half visible, murmuring insults nobody could trace back to her. Korath stood 12 feet of natural plating and 8,000 years of undefeated ground campaigns. Zephyr moved objects with his mind and rarely bothered moving his feet. Fane's crystalline hide had shrugged off ordnance. Rixus outran targeting systems. Vex fought with more limbs than most species had ideas. And then there was the human. Small, quiet, permanently overlooked, wearing gear sized for someone twice her mass. For 3 months the 7 of them had made a sport of her, never anything that would trigger a disciplinary flag, just knocked over equipment, blocked sightlines, and Grimlock's favorite line, delivered at volume during every drill. Hadn't the botanical gardens been hiring? She never answered. She picked up what they scattered and kept working. Velcanos had chalked it up to a weak species learning its place. He'd been wrong in a way that still kept him up at night. The live fire simulation began ordinarily enough. 6 predators claimed the high ground, the shadows, the choke points their bodies were built for. Kira Voss stood exactly where the countdown had put her and didn't move. 12 seconds in, she wasn't there anymore. Grimlock spun mid-charge to find her already behind him, and the shot that dropped him landed in the one seam his armor didn't cover. He hit the deck like collapsing scaffolding. Scythia vanished entirely, running every stealth protocol her bloodline owned, and came apart screaming 6 feet off the ground, hanging in a snare that shouldn't have existed, rigged by someone who had never left her starting mark. Zephyr lit up with psionic fire and threw everything he had at her chest. The air around Kira simply refused it. He poured in more sweat-cutting tracks down his elongated skull, and she walked through the pressure like it was weather, laid one hand on his shoulder, and watched him drop to his knees. Fane came in at full momentum. Built for worlds that tried to kill everything on them, she stepped aside, took his own arm, and sent 12 feet of crystal into the far wall hard enough to crack reinforced concrete. Rixus and Vex broke from opposite angles at the same instant, a textbook pincer that should have ended her in half a second. 3 camera feeds later showed her meeting both attacks from 3 directions Velcanos still couldn't reconcile with physics. That left Korath. He looked around the arena at 6 defeated legends, then at the woman who'd done it without raising her voice, and for the first time in his military life, he ran. She caught him before he cleared 10 yards, folded his own charge back against him, and left him staring at the ceiling, chest heaving, armor scraped and useless. "What in the void are you?" he managed, not really a question anymore. She crouched beside him, unbothered, checking the seal on her glove. "Someone who got bored waiting for a real fight," she said, and stood, and walked away, leaving him on the floor with the other 6. Now, 3 days later, Velcano stood in front of the council summoned to make sense of it, and beside their chairs sat Kira herself, small and unbothered, a private smile tugging at her mouth like she already knew where this was going. "You are telling this chamber," General Mortak said, his engineered features flickering through colors Velcanos had never seen on him, "that this human defeated 7 of our finest in single combat. I witnessed it on 4 separate sensor arrays, General. Admiral Thera solidified fully out of her camouflage, something she never did unless deeply unsettled. She moved faster than we could track. She turned a telekinetic assault back on itself. Explain that. Every eye in the room swung to Kira. She stood, unhurried, and let the silence stretch just long enough to hurt. This was it. Volcanos would realize later, not the arena, not even the battle still to come. This. Before I answer that, she said, I should probably mention I'm not actually very good. Nobody breathed. The thing is, she went on, human training doesn't build individual killers. It builds people who improvise faster than the problem changes. What you saw wasn't me being exceptional. That was baseline doctrine, applied to 7 very predictable targets. She let her gaze move down the row of warlords, unhurried, almost gentle. I'm middle of my class, honestly. Maybe below average in hand-to-hand. My own instructors back home could have put all 7 of them down blindfolded, and none of them are considered special. High Commander Brutaxis's chair groaned under him as he leaned forward. You are claiming there are humans who exceed you. Constantly, it's a big planet. She said it lightly, the way someone mentions the weather, and that was somehow worse than if she'd boasted. Volcanos watched 12 of the most powerful beings alive absorb, in real time, the collapse of everything they'd believed about galactic military hierarchy. Nobody got the chance to respond. Alarms tore through the chamber before Mortak could close his mouth. 47 Ravager vessels breaching the perimeter, 50,000 raiders inbound, a species that had unmade entire civilizations for sport. Kira was already moving toward the tactical display before anyone ordered evacuation. Permission to help coordinate the defense. This isn't a drill, human. No, she agreed, hands already reworking the holographic overlay. It's worse for them than they know. She didn't fight the battle so much as compose it. Fleets positioned to look weak became jaws. Supply lines that looked easy became traps sprung from 3 directions. Ravager crews built for hit-and-run tactics found themselves fighting an enemy who refused to be where the numbers said it should be. When the Ravager command vessel finally tried to break off and run, the tactical officer called it out as a target. Let it go, Kira said. Mortak stared at her. We have them beaten. That's exactly why we let them run. A cornered raider fights like it has nothing left to lose. A raider who escapes tells every other raider in the void that this sector isn't worth the trip. She didn't look up from the display. Long war, not a good afternoon. By the time the last Ravager signature blinked out of sensor range, the fleet had lost less than any casualty model on record, and the raiders had lost 70% of everything they'd brought. Salvage crews would spend the next decade paying for the sector's defenses off what the raiders left behind. 3 weeks later, Volcanos packed the last of his belongings for reassignment. The United Earth Defense Academy filed in the archives as an unremarkable mid-tier training post. Kira found him on his way out, leaning in the doorway with her arms crossed. You gave a fair account, she said. A lot of people wouldn't have. Cadet Voss, that business about being middle of your class, was that true? She grinned, and for a second she looked exactly like what she was barely past adolescence, having just rewritten a species' entire threat assessment before lunch. Honestly, I undersold it. Bottom third, I do logistics, not front-line work. The ones who scare people are the ones who go into combat because they like it. She pushed off the doorframe. You'll want to revise the file on us. Peaceful species prefers diplomacy, that part's still true. Just add the reason. We're that good at the alternative that we don't need it. She turned to go, then paused halfway down the corridor and looked back once. Enjoy the academy, instructor. Try not to grade on a curve. Volcanos sealed his transport case and set the reassignment orders on top of it, watching the academy's insignia catch the light as the door hissed shut behind her footsteps, already fading down the hall. Somewhere out past the edge of the sector, an entire world was quietly grading its own soldiers below average by standards that had just ended 7 military careers in the space of 90 seconds. He didn't feel afraid, exactly. He felt like a man about to walk into a classroom 3 centuries too late to have skipped any of the reading.